What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plaisant's podcast filled to the brim with glitchy analysis and freezing cold takes so cold that they're boiling hot. Today's episode, we are going to be previewing the Georgia football season. Let's talk about the stars at quarterback. Carson Beck, one of the Heisman frontrunners, came in to replace Stetson Bennett last year and tore it up. He is going to have another phenomenal year. And to pair with him in the backfield, you have a transfer from Florida in Trevor Etienne, the leading rusher for the Gators last year. We expect that this entire workload is going to go to him and him only. That dynamic duo in the backfield is definitely something to keep an eye on when you watch Georgia. They're hard to miss. On the defensive side of the ball, the number one player to look out for is Malachi Starks. Kirby Smart comes from the Nick Saban tree. Very similarly, every Nick Saban defense has a star DB, and for the Georgia Bulldogs, it's more of the same, and Malachi Starks is that guy. He flies all over the field. He's a great pass defender, and I think he's a pretty damn good run stopper as well. Now, some storylines for this Georgia team. They have one of the best offensive lines in all of college football. At the guard, Tate Rutledge is probably the second best, maybe even the best guard in all of college football. If we're going to see anything from this Georgia Bulldogs team, it's going to be them running the football. Now, that all being said, the wide receiver group is pretty unproven, and that's something that's going to be shaky. It looks like a gun with no ammo. Now, obviously, like Alabama, like Ohio State, Georgia replaces its 5 stars with 5 stars and 4 stars, and that's what they've got on this roster. But nobody that has had over, 500-600 yards of offense year in and year out for at least 2 seasons. So that's a big question coming into this year. Who will be the standout receiver for Georgia this season? Now let's talk about some of the key losses and key additions to this team on the losses side of the ball. Once again, very similar to Alabama, Georgia is now losing player after player after player to the draft. To name a few, Brock Bowers, tight end, Amarius Mims, offensive tackle, Kamari Lassiter, defensive back, Javon Bullard, another defensive back, Tyke Smith, another defensive back, Ladd McConkey, a wide receiver. There are tons of losses on this Georgia team, but once again, lots of talent to fill those holes. And on the addition side of the ball, you have Colby Young, a wide receiver from Miami. Now, talking about a gun with no ammo, Colby Young could be the spark that this offense needs. He never really stood out as like a wide receiver one at Miami, but Georgia needs something, and he could definitely be that something. Now, in the backfield, I already mentioned him. Trevor Etienne comes in, transfers from Florida. He is going to be a major feature of this offense, so keep an eye out for that. Now, another storyline to get into is the fact that this is the toughest schedule of the Kirby Smart era. Georgia has been able to hide behind the shroud of being in the SEC East every single season. Now, obviously, their championships are earned. They won the SEC championship game or lost it and got into the playoffs and won their playoff games. They earned their spot, don't get me wrong. But when you don't have to play Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M all in the same year, every year, you can get by with maybe dropping a game or not performing at your best in week 3 or week 9 or whatever you want to say. But now that there's no divisions in the SEC, I could definitely see this Georgia football team running into trouble, and that's exactly what I've predicted. So let's get in without ado to the record prediction. For Georgia, I have them going a very disappointing 9-3, but let's talk about it. Versus Clemson, ACC, SEC opener, SEC has almost always dominated this game. I give Georgia the talent edge, the coaching edge, the special teams edge. Clemson has not, adapted well to the transfer portal and the new NIL recruiting and whatnot. And so I don't know if they have the talent to beat Georgia anymore. So I will definitely give that W to Georgia. Tennessee Tech, automatic W. at Kentucky. I think another game similar to Clemson. They just don't have the manpower to compete. They have really never had it, and Georgia has dominated Kentucky over the last decade, 2 decades, maybe even 3 decades. But then the first tough game of the year at Alabama, I think the Georgia Bulldogs dropped this game very similarly to the 2020 COVID season. Bryant-Denny Stadium is a tough place to play, even with hardly any fans, but this time it's going to be jam-packed. And I give Alabama football all of the credit here. They're going to win that game. Georgia's going to drop it, but they get a rebound at home versus Auburn and then at home versus Mississippi State, but then another extremely tough road test at Texas. I think the Georgia Bulldogs drop this game, and strictly because of my theory of the gun with no ammo. Receivers are key to modern college football, and Texas has got them in droves. I don't see any stars here on this Georgia receiving core, and so in a shootout, I'm going to lean in the way of maybe a better quarterback and definitely a better receiving core. Now we go back to Jacksonville, Florida to play in one of the oldest rivalries in all of college football versus Florida. Georgia definitely gets the win there. But once again, the road test comes to fate. At Ole Miss, I think that the Georgia Bulldogs drop this game as well. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, you are an absolute idiot. But every single season, there is a disappointing top 10 team. I think that Georgia is exactly that team. Every year in the offseason, they are making noise with some kind of abuse and DUIs and just problems off the field that you don't see other teams doing nearly as much. Now, at Alabama, there are definitely some problems with players off the field, but not to this extent. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous what's going on at Georgia. Hardly any discipline, but I think that it comes to roost this year. 9-3. Obviously, I'm giving versus Tennessee at home, UMass at home, Georgia Tech at home. All of those are really easy dubs. I don't know if Georgia can make the playoffs being 9-3, but it's definitely possible because, like I said, one of the most talented football rosters in all of college football. They missed their chance barely to three-peat last year, but I don't know if it's in the cards this year to repeat. 9-3, that's what I got Georgia. We're going to be doing Kentucky next. Make sure you tune in for that episode, and we'll see you next time.